Tuesday, a top Trump-appointed U.S. intelligence official resigned. Joe Kent, a staunch Trump supporter, writing in part, "I cannot in good conscience support the ongoing war in Iran. Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation, and it is clear that we started this war due to pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby." The White House called that claim absurd.
To his resignation letter on social media, he wrote that he could not support the ongoing war with Iran and that Iran posed no imminent threat. He also added that the war started
Director of National Counterterrorism, Joe Kent, he just resigned today. He said he can't support your conflict with Iran. What's your reaction to that? And did you?
Well, I read his statement. I always thought he was a nice guy, but I always thought he was weak on security, very weak on security. I didn't know him well, but I thought he seemed like a pretty nice guy. But when I read his statement, I realized that it's a good thing that he's out, because he said that Iran was not a threat. Iran was a threat. Every country realized what a threat Iran was. The question is whether or not they wanted to do something about it.
The commander-in-chief and his administration had a very difficult decision to make. I don't know where Joe Kent is getting his information, but he wasn't in those briefings, clearly, because the Secretary of State, the Secretary of War, and everyone, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Kane, they had exquisite intelligence, and we understood that this was a serious moment for us. Had the president waited, I am personally convinced that we would have mass casualties of Americans, service members and others, and our installations would have been dramatically damaged. And so we had to, the president felt that he had to strike first to prevent those mass casualties. That's
No, I think that's exactly right. I mean, obviously, you should be concerned when the director of the National Counterterrorism Center quits over a war that you're in the middle of from the largest state-sponsored terrorism in the world. At the same time, you know, the things he said, the idea that that Israel stoked this war, that we got into this war because Israel pushed us into it. I mean, Donald Trump is not the kind of guy to get pushed into a war. He may be a lot of things. That is not what he is. Beyond that, he also had this underlying sentiment. He talked about his wife who had been killed in the Iraq War, suggested that Israel had pulled us into that war either. There's no evidence for that whatsoever. I think this underlines some of the ties that Joe Kent had to other people and some of his underlying views that are animating why he quit. Also notable, Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, very careful about how she positioned herself, endorsing the war, but saying it's because the president gets to decide what an imminent threat is, not endorsing it herself, though.
She says, as our commander-in-chief, he, Trump, is responsible for determining what is and is not an imminent threat. President Trump concluded that the terrorist Islamic regime in Iran posed an imminent threat, and he took action based on that conclusion. It's very notable also, she does not say that she supports the war. She just said it was Trump's decision.
Right, but this is a very complicated thing. This guy has said some anti-Semitic things. At the very same time, which is problematic, like no, full stop. At the very same time, soon after the war started, Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, said that the imminent threat was that we knew that Iran was, that if Iran was attacked, and we believed that it would be attacked by Israel, that they would immediately come after us. And that was the immediate threat that they used as a rationale for the war. So both things are operating at the same time. This guy is very problematic because he has anti-Semitic sentiments. At the very same time, the administration, that was their first rationale for the war, was that they thought that Israel was going to strike first, that Iran would strike back, and they would strike us when they struck back, and that would precipitate a wider conflict, and we would have consequences from that.
But there's one point that I think is important in that Marco Rubio was part of all of the intelligence briefings on this, and Joe Kent was not. So Marco Rubio had access to everything that Joe Kent did not have access to. What was also left out of that letter was Joe Kent's plans now, I suppose, to be part of this resistance, go on podcasts that have been very critical of Israel. This is someone who, over the course of the next few days, you'll see more reporting on how he was seen as a chief leaker in this White House. And that goes to some of the problems I have with some folks who are now amplifying Joe Kent as if they agree with him or as if they suddenly believe that he is someone to be trusted on
Donald
these
Trump
issues.
Amplified Joe Kent because he put him in charge of the National Counterterrorism
Which
Center.
is not about Iran.
And in addition to that,
if he was a leaker and if he was bad on national security, why leave somebody in a sensitive, important job like that if you thought that he was disloyal, leaking, and he was bad on the substance of the thing that he was in charge of?
We're assuming that the Office of the Director of National Intelligence is an important job. I mean, it's kind of a bureaucratic, nowheresville. Yeah, I'm torn on Joe Kent because on the one hand, he did primary and defeat a colleague and friend of mine, Jamie Herrera Butler, in 2022. On the other hand, he has a decorated career as a Green Beret, as a CIA paramilitary officer. He lost his wife, Shannon, in 2019 in Syria. He's a Gold Star husband. I give him the benefit of the doubt on the reasons for his resignation in this case. I think the question of whether or not a resignation, should have been public is one thing. I think it is right and appropriate if you do not feel you can, faithfully execute and support the policies of administration you're working for, you should resign. That is the appropriate thing to do in the natural course. I have more questions about the statement that Tulsi Gabbard put out because on the one hand, it was a masterclass in saying something without saying anything at all. On the other hand, you're going before Congress tomorrow.
She has not been seen or heard of in months, probably for this exact reason, because we're at war with Iran. And she has explicitly said she did not believe that we should be at war with Iran.
And has been on record saying it for years. So let's not act as though this is a new thing with this administration. She has been on record for quite some time through multiple administrations, voicing her opinion against going to war with Iran for the exact same reasons that many of the individuals who the Trump administration fired regarding Iranian intelligence, those individuals were against it as well. I think that with Kent, it's important to recognize, and it's a good point that I believe Charles made earlier, this is a guy who's looking at his career path after this. He's also somebody who understands the MAGA fissures. And at the end of the day, there are a lot of people who aligned around Trump in 2016 and 2020 and in 2024 who did it almost solely because this man talked about no more endless wars. These are individuals who watched what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan. These are individuals who trusted that he was going to put America first, meaning we're not going and creating wars and chaos in other places, and recognize fully that their young men and women in the armed forces may be up next. As we can recall, just a week ago, his press secretary did not leave it off the table that the possibility of a draft could happen, which wild, by the way. This is a president who has not stood by the very thing that he ran on. And many people are seeing this as problematic, but are also questioning the allegiance with Israel because it does seem that there's some puppeteering going on backstage. And that's not anti-Semitic. That is just a question that they have because they also recognize
usually when you bring up Israel, and I don't think your intention was that, but usually when people talk about puppeteering and Jews, it's clear anti-Semitic.
But let me just ask,
播报新闻是我的日常，必须时刻保持妆容和皮肤的最佳状态。当来到人生中最重要的时刻， 也是 KS 逆时奇迹，帮助我轻松驾驭，闪闪发光。KS 逆时奇迹活肤露全效精华、精华霜，多达5种 EGF 6大冻龄关键成分，保湿效果让我非常满意，小细纹也不再困扰我。我就是我自己的最佳女主角 ，KS 让我从容自信，光彩动人。我是我人生中的大女主，我的最爱我做主。KS 逆时奇迹系列热卖中，下单请上快点购，透过中天新闻网 App 下单立减50，或输入 CTI 推荐码有额外折扣。